There are nights in small places where electricity does not simply fail. It feels as if it is taken away, as if something larger than human systems decides that light is no longer permitted. And in those moments, the world does not just become dark. It becomes unfamiliar in a way that makes even your own thoughts feel distant. In Isafjordur, those nights were called blackouts, but nobody ever said it loudly, as if naming them too directly might invite them sooner. The first time it happened to me, I remember the exact silence that followed the lights going out. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something that replaced it. Something so still that even breathing felt inappropriate. I stood near my window for a long time without moving, watching the town dissolve into shapes instead of objects. And it was in that unnatural stillness that I heard something outside that did not belong to wind or structure or animal movement. A slow, deliberate tapping, like something was testing whether the world was still reachable. At first, I assumed it was a branch, or ice shifting, or some logical explanation my mind was trying to construct in real time, because humans are not comfortable without patterns. But the sound did not behave as if it were natural. It paused when I paused. It resumed when I moved. It was patient in a way that felt intentional. When I finally forced myself to look outside, I could not see much beyond the glass, only the faint outline of the street and the uneven glow of distant emergency lights, struggling to define the darkness. But across the road, there was something standing near Trevor's house that I could not immediately register as human or animal or object. It was simply a vertical absence of clarity, as if the darkness had thickened in one place and decided to hold shape. And then it moved, not walking, not stepping, but shifting. Like something remembering how bodies are supposed to behave. I remember thinking that if I blinked, I would lose it completely, so I did not blink. And in that long moment of forced attention, I realized the shape was closer to the ground than it should have been, as if it was not standing on the earth, but emerging from it slowly, the way something might rise if it had been buried for a very long time and had not yet decided whether returning was necessary. The lights came back without warning, violently bright in comparison to the darkness, and everything outside suddenly looked normal again in the harsh yellow spill of street lamps and house lights. But Trevor's door was open, not broken, not forced, just open in a way that suggested it had never been fully closed to begin with. And for a moment, I convinced myself that nothing unusual had happened, that my mind had simply filled the blackout with fear, because that is what minds do when they lack information. Until I saw the feather. It was black, unnaturally smooth, lying in the snow near the doorway, deliberately placed rather than dropped. And I remember thinking, with a strange heaviness in my chest, that ravens were common here, but feathers did not usually feel like messages. Trevor did not come to class the next day. At first, nobody worried, because absence is normal in small towns, where weather controls schedules more than people do. But days passed, and his presence did not return, and what replaced him was an increasing discomfort that nobody openly acknowledged. The strange part was not just that he was missing, but that nobody could agree on the last time they had properly seen him. It was on the fourth night after the blackout that I went for a walk alone, partly because sleep felt impossible, and partly because the silence in rooms had started to feel more suffocating than the cold outside. The sky was unusually clear that night, which, in Isafjordur, always feels suspicious because clarity is rare here. And I followed the road up toward the mountain pass where the town becomes small enough to ignore. That is when I saw the silhouette. It was standing at a height where no one should have been standing in the dark, balanced on the edge of rock and sky in a way that suggested either complete confidence or complete absence of awareness. At first, I thought it was a person because the human mind insists on familiarity even when it should not. But the longer I looked, the more I understood that its proportions were wrong in a subtle yet irreversible way, as if it had learned human posture through observation rather than experience. It moved when I stepped forward, not away from me, not toward me, but in a way that suggested recognition. And for the briefest moment, illuminated by shifting northern light, I thought I saw something familiar in its outline. Something that resembled Trevor, but not in a way that comforted me, more in a way that suggested imitation rather than identity. Then it stopped moving entirely and looked down at me. The feeling that followed was not fear in the ordinary sense, but something closer to being evaluated, as if my presence had been registered and stored rather than experienced. I did not run immediately, and I still do not understand why, but there are moments when the body does not obey the urgency of thought, as if it is waiting for permission from something deeper. When I finally left, I did not turn back. Trevor returned 4 days later, at least physically, but what returned was not continuity. It was reconstruction. He spoke less, moved differently, reacted to familiar things as if they were slightly unfamiliar, and sometimes paused mid-sentence like he was searching for the correct version of speech. There were moments when he looked at objects as if he were trying to remember why they were supposed to matter. And then came the recordings. His voice, when played back, contained patterns that did not belong to modern language, fragments of speech that felt older than education, older than culture, as if they had been stored somewhere and retrieved incorrectly. One translation made no sense in a human context at all, except in the most disturbing possible interpretation. A statement about forgetting the body, as if identity were something worn temporarily rather than lived. That was when I started to understand that the blackouts were not the absence of power. They were in the absence of something else. Something that used the absence. And the final night, when I decided to leave Isafjörður, I heard his voice behind me in a place where he should not have been standing, closer than distance should have allowed, saying something that did not feel like a threat, but like a statement of inevitability, as if departure was not escape but delay. "We will come for you next." And when I turned, there was nothing behind me except ravens on the rooftops, perfectly still, watching the road like they already knew the exact moment I would leave, and the exact moment I would be expected to return. Story 2. The sound that stays after. There are certain sounds that do not end when they should. Not echoes, not memory, something else. In my town, people did not talk about it directly, but everyone knew the rule. If you heard something after it had already stopped, you did not go looking for it. You ignored it, or you left. I didn't understand that rule at first, not until the night I stayed. It started with a storm that wasn't violent or destructive, just steady in a way that felt intentional. The rain tapped against the windows, soft and consistent, the kind of sound that makes a place feel safe simply because it does not change. I sat alone, listening to it for a long time, until it stopped. Not gradually, not fading, but completely and without warning. The silence that followed felt wrong. It wasn't just quiet. It felt like something had been removed. I waited for the rain to return, but it didn't. And then, after a few seconds that stretched longer than they should have, I heard it again. The same sound of rain, but closer than before. Too clear, too present. It was not coming from outside. It felt like it was inside the walls. At first, I ignored it and tried to find a logical explanation, something simple like pipes or structure, reacting to the storm. But the sound didn't stay in one place. It moved slowly from one wall to another, then to the ceiling, and finally, it settled directly above me. I stayed still. I did not look up, because somewhere in that moment, I understood that noticing it too directly might change something. The sound continued above me for a few seconds, then it stopped again. This time, the silence did not last. It was replaced by something else. Footsteps, soft and measured, moving across the ceiling in a slow, deliberate pattern. They were not heavy, not loud, but they were unmistakable. Each step carried a pause, as if whatever was moving was learning how movement worked. I told myself it was not real, that I was imagining patterns where none existed. Then the footsteps stopped, directly above me, and everything became still again. After a moment, there was a single knock from the ceiling. Light and precise, not aggressive, not accidental, intentional. I stood up slowly without realizing I had decided to move. Another knock followed, slightly to the side this time, then another, each one shifting position as if tracking something, as if tracking me. That was when I made a mistake. I spoke, just one word, simple and unnecessary, but enough to acknowledge that I was aware. The response was immediate. The footsteps returned, faster now, more certain in their movement. They crossed the ceiling, then moved down along the wall behind me, stopping just out of sight. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because the space behind me no longer felt empty. Then I heard breathing, not human, not animal, but steady, in a way that felt controlled rather than natural. It was too consistent, too deliberate, like something imitating the idea of breath instead of needing it. I closed my eyes, not out of fear, but out of understanding. If I saw it, I would not be able to forget it, and some things are not meant to stay in the mind. The breathing remained close for a moment, then something else followed. A sound that almost resembled speech, but not in any language I could recognize. It came in patterns, structured but incomplete, as if meaning was being formed without fully understanding how meaning worked. I did not respond. I stayed still and waited for it to end. After some time, the presence shifted. It moved away slowly, back up the wall, across the ceiling, and then it was gone. The silence returned, but it did not feel empty anymore. It felt occupied, as if something was still there. simply choosing not to be heard. I stayed awake the entire night, not because I expected it to return, but because I knew it had never fully left. When morning came, everything appeared normal again. The rain had resumed, the house felt stable, and the walls were quiet. For a moment, I almost believed that nothing had happened, until I looked at the ceiling. There were marks. Not scratches or damage, just faint impressions, spaced in a pattern that resembled footsteps. They led from one corner of the room to the exact place where I had been standing, and then they stopped. That was when I remembered the rule. If you hear something after it has already stopped, you do not respond. But I had done more than that. I had answered. That night, I left the house and stayed somewhere else, telling myself that distance would make a difference. For a while, it did. The silence felt normal again, and the world behaved in ways that made sense. Until a week later, when it started raining again. The sound was soft at first, then steady, familiar enough to almost feel safe, and then it stopped, completely. This time, I did not wait. I already knew what would follow. The sound returned, closer than before. Not outside, not within walls, but directly above me. The footsteps began immediately, without hesitation, without the uncertainty they had before. They moved in a straight line across the ceiling and stopped exactly overhead. There was no pause, just a single knock, and then something spoke, clearer this time, more formed, closer to language, but still not entirely human. I did not understand the words, but I understood the meaning. It was not asking anymore. It was remembering, and in that moment, I understood something I should have known from the beginning. Some sounds do not follow you, they teach you, and once they do not need to find you again, because they already know exactly where you will be.